Any resolution seeking the authorization for military force must first present its case so that the American people can see, in no uncertain terms, the necessity of such an action for their own protection from an imminent threat. We begin today with the factual predicates, logical arguments, and historical analogues supporting a proposed United States intervention in Burma or Myanmar. We face a dangerous convergence of a brutal military dictatorship, large-scale human trafficking operations, and transnational scam factories that directly harm American citizens through financial fraud and identity theft schemes. The Burmese junta's complicity in these crimes has created a haven for organized criminal networks that enslave thousands and steal billions from victims worldwide, including Americans. In the following sections, we will detail how Myanmar's situation impacts U.S. citizens, why American leadership must respond decisively, and how historical precedent supports a U.S. protectorate as the viable path to restore security and human dignity in Burma. Burma's military regime, which seized power in a February 2021 coup, has plunged the nation into chaos and civil war. This instability has been exploited by transnational crime syndicates, which partnered with elements of the regime to establish enclaves of lawlessness. Along Myanmar's frontiers, especially the Thai-Myanmar border region, vast scam complexes have arisen under the protection of militia groups allied to the junta. These criminal compounds engage in industrial-scale online fraud, from cryptocurrency investment cons to romance scams known as pig butchering. Crucially, they are built on modern slavery. Tens of thousands of trafficked workers are held captive and forced to perpetrate scams under threat of violence. The regime's tolerance, and indeed profit, from this illicit industry is well documented. A U.S. Treasury investigation found that Burmese military-linked militias collaborate in and tax these scam operations, selling services like electricity to keep the fraud factories running. Human rights monitors report regular and increasing evidence of military and police complicity in the trafficking rings and scam centers. In short, Burma's dictators have not only oppressed their own people through brute force, they have enabled a vast criminal enterprise that enslaves innocents and spreads misery far beyond its borders. Buildings in Shwe Koko, Myanmar's Karen state, are now considered an alleged hub for cyber scam operations. One major compound there, Yatai New City, was built over the past decade specifically for gambling, illicit trafficking, and online fraud targeting victims worldwide, especially Americans. This sprawling complex, a city in name and scale, exemplifies the nexus between Burma's military-linked militias and transnational crime. Under the leadership of a militia warlord, Saw Chit Thu, who is aligned with the junta, Yatai New City turned a remote border village into a high-tech fraud factory city, catering to criminal syndicates. Reports from escaped workers recount hellish conditions. Recruits lured under false pretenses find themselves imprisoned behind casino-like compound walls, beaten if they fail to meet scam quotas, held for ransom from their families, and even forced into sex work if they resist. Such is the human trafficking nightmare playing out daily under the Burmese regime's watch. The United Nations and U.S. State Department have classified these practices as a form of modern slavery and human trafficking, noting that thousands of victims from across Asia and beyond have been trapped in Myanmar's scam centers. Burma's neighbors have begun multinational crackdowns to rescue their citizens from these compounds. For instance, Thailand's police chief estimates up to 100,000 people may have been working in the Mayawadi region's scam hubs even after recent rescue efforts. This is a humanitarian catastrophe enabled by the lawlessness and corruption of Burma's dictatorship. While the humanitarian dimension is shocking, it is essential to recognize the direct impact on the American people. These Southeast Asian fraud factories are not just a distant crime. They have targeted US citizens on an unprecedented scale. In 2024 alone, Americans lost over $10 billion to scams emanating from these criminal centers, a 66% increase over the previous year as the scamming industry expanded aggressively. The FBI has warned that US residents have become a top target for the crime network's financial fraud schemes. Scam operatives in Myanmar actively recruit English-speaking workers and set daily quotas to specifically defraud Americans online. Using social media and text messages, they reach directly into our communities, impersonating friends or romantic interests, and tricking victims into fraudulent investments on fake cryptocurrency platforms. The result is devastating. Retirees swindled out of life savings, families bankrupted, identities stolen, and even suicides in the wake of financial ruin. The Treasury Department confirms that unsuspecting Americans lost over $10 billion in 2024 to these scams. And a U.S. Institute of Peace study notes U.S. victims lost at least $3.5 billion in 2023, showing an alarming upward trend. Every one of those dollars corresponds to an American individual or family defrauded, highlighting that this is not an abstract issue, but a direct assault on the financial security of Americans. Moreover, the threat goes beyond just monetary loss. Identity theft schemes are interwoven with these fraud operations. Scammers often coax personal information and account details from their victims, which leads to long-term identity fraud issues for Americans. The Department of Justice has already had to seize cryptocurrency accounts and assets linked to these networks, which underscores how badly United States law enforcement is struggling to keep up with a problem rooted in foreign safe havens. There is even concern, believe it or not, that Americans themselves could be trafficked to work in these scam compounds. While most trafficking victims have so far come from Asia, the FBI has issued warnings about fake tech job postings that could lure United States citizens abroad into forced scam labor. In short, Burma's scam empire poses a multifaceted national security risk. It directly victimizes our citizens, siphons wealth from our economy, and could even ensnare our people in forced criminality. Our senators and representatives represent millions of Americans who are potential targets of these schemes, whose constituents receive those scam texts and calls every day. Stopping this threat at its source is thus not only a matter of justice and morality, but an urgent protective action for the American people. Allowing Burma to remain a crime sanctuary undermines the security of the United States and our allies. The billions in scam proceeds don't simply vanish. They fuel other illicit activities that can harm United States interests. According to experts, the funds from Southeast Asia's cyber fraud are reinvested into narcotics and arms trafficking, organized crime, and even insurgent militias. Indeed, United States intelligence reports indicate that some of the revenue generated by Myanmar's scam networks has financed militias affiliated with the ruling junta. In effect, American victims' money is bolstering an illegitimate regime that has been accused of genocide and crimes against humanity. The Burmese military, responsible for atrocities such as the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya and brutal crackdowns on peaceful protesters, is now indirectly bankrolled by global cybercrime. This should alarm every policymaker. Our inaction means United States fraud victims may be unwittingly funding a rogue state's repression and a widening civil war. Additionally, the scam network's tech-savvy operations could potentially be exploited by hostile state actors. Today, they steal money. Tomorrow, the same infrastructure could be used to steal sensitive data or disrupt financial systems. We cannot ignore the possibility that adversarial powers might see value in a failed state haven like Myanmar for launching cyber attacks or conducting illicit finance under the radar. Thus, Burma's situation represents not only a humanitarian crisis and criminal threat, but a geostrategic vulnerability on the global stage. There is also a regional stability concern. Myanmar's neighbors are straining under refugee outflows and cross-border crime that's emanating from the junta's misrule and these scam compounds. China, for instance, has seen tens of thousands of its citizens victimized and has even tacitly supported ethnic rebel offensives against Myanmar's scam hubs. Thailand has had to conduct joint operations to repatriate its trafficked nationals and bolster border security. The longer the junta-allowed crime empire persists, the greater the chance of destabilizing conflict or unilateral interventions by regional powers, as China's pressure has already demonstrated. By decisively acting to remove the junta and restore order, the United States would also prevent a wider meltdown that could invite intervention from authoritarian powers or spark a larger regional war. American leadership can thus ensure stability in a critical region, much as we did in past decades, by leading international coalitions to end conflicts threatening global peace. Some may ask, why must the United States consider military force and an administrative protectorate rather than continued sanctions or international policing? The stark answer is that every other measure has been tried and has failed to halt this downward spiral. The United States has already imposed sanctions on Burma's junta leaders since the 2021 coup and on key individuals behind the scam networks. While these sanctions have frozen assets and named and shamed some perpetrators, they have not stopped the crimes. The illicit networks simply shift operations or find new intermediaries, as seen when crackdowns in one country, say Cambodia or China, push scam operations into the lawless corners of Myanmar. Diplomacy has proven equally inadequate. The junta has shown no genuine willingness to dismantle the scam compounds, likely because elements of the military are profiting from them. Appeals to the regime's better nature are futile when corruption and survival drive its decisions. Myanmar's generals have ignored ASEAN's peace plans and brazenly withstood international criticism over their human rights abuses. Meanwhile, thousands more victims are trafficked and billions more dollars stolen each passing month we hesitate. Crucially, law enforcement cannot reach into Myanmar so long as the junta shields these criminals. The scam kingpins and their militia partners operate with impunity in enclaves like Shui Koko, where Myanmar's sovereignty, twisted by the junta, blocks foreign police or Interpol action. We cannot extradite what we cannot reach. Short of force, the only theoretical path to stop the scams would be persuading the regime to act, something they have failed to do for years, and by all accounts cannot do due to their own entanglement in the crimes. Some of the ethnic rebels fighting the junta have even taken it upon themselves to attack scam bases, accusing the junta of tolerating and profiting from the industry. If even local groups see that the state itself is the problem, then incremental measures like sanctions or cyber defense alone are simply not enough. The gravity and scale of the threat, modern slavery combined with multinational fraud on an epic scale, call for a response just as large. Only by removing the criminal junta from power and placing Burma under a responsible administration can we uproot the scam networks, liberate the trafficking victims, and ensure this menace does not re-emerge. While the prospect of intervention is serious, it is by no means unprecedented when weighed against history's lessons. The United States has stepped forward against similar threats before, using force when necessary to protect our citizens and uphold our values. Over 2 centuries ago, President Thomas Jefferson dispatched the United States Navy and Marines to North Africa to end the Barbary pirates' reign of terror. Those pirates were state-backed corsairs who kidnapped Americans and Europeans for ransom. After diplomacy and payments failed, the United States fought the Barbary Wars from 1801 to 1815 to stop the enslavement of American sailors and extortion of American treasure. The young republic's willingness to project power established a core principle. America will not stand idle while our people are preyed upon by foreign powers or criminals. Today's cyber scam rings are, in a way, the high-tech grandsons of those Barbary pirates, just as surely enriching themselves by plundering Americans, albeit via bank accounts instead of merchant ships. If we honor the resolve of our founders, we must show the same determination to defend our citizens now as we did then. In more recent memory, the United States led a coalition to oust a dictator in Panama in 1989, when General Manuel Noriega turned his country into a narco-trafficking hub that threatened Americans. Noriega's regime was indicted for drug smuggling into the United States and was accused of endangering U.S. nationals. When he brutally nullified democracy and an American soldier was killed by his forces, President George H.W. Bush launched Operation Just Cause. American troops swiftly removed Noriega from power and restored order and democracy to Panama. That action was driven by the recognition that criminal dictators who harm American lives and interests will be held accountable. The parallels to Burma are clear. Like Noriega's Panama, today's Myanmar is a rogue regime providing safe haven to criminals, in this case, scam and trafficking kingpins, whose actions directly hurt Americans. Just as we defended the Panama Canal and U.S. citizens then, we are justified in defending the digital highways of our financial system and the security of our people now. History also shows that long-term stabilization and reform are achievable under temporary U.S. stewardship. After World War II, the United States did not shy away from a deep commitment to rebuilding shattered nations that had threatened global security. In both Germany and Japan, American-led occupations laid the groundwork for prosperous democracies where militaristic, criminal regimes once stood. For example, the U.S. occupation of Japan from 1945 to 1952 under General MacArthur demilitarized and democratized that society, turning an aggressor state into one of America's closest allies and a bastion of freedom in Asia. That success story underscores that an American protectorate, if managed with wisdom and principle, can transform a troubled country. In Burma's case, our aim would be similar: to remove an abusive junta, eradicate the criminal enterprises, and foster a legitimate government that serves its people rather than exploits them. We can draw lessons from past U.S. interventions, positive ones like the reconstruction of Japan, and cautionary ones as well, like the need to plan for insurgencies like in Iraq. The key point is that the United States has historically accepted the burden of leadership to secure peace and protect human rights, and we have the capacity to do so effectively. Turning Myanmar into an American protectorate is a grave decision, but it is proportionate to the gravity of the crisis. What would this entail? First, with congressional authorization and hopefully support from international partners, U.S. forces would intervene militarily to neutralize the illegitimate junta and its aligned militias. The objective would be to rapidly secure key areas, including the major cities and the known locations of scam compounds, such as the Mirawaddy region, with minimal harm to civilians. The presence of these scam complexes provides clear targets that must be taken and shut down early in the operation. American and allied special forces, working off intelligence of where trafficking victims are held, would prioritize liberating those compounds and rescuing the captives. This not only serves our humanitarian mandate, but also immediately disrupts the scam networks that require those human pawns to operate. So, once the junta's command and control are eliminated and law and order are imposed by coalition forces, the protectorate phase would begin. Under this plan, Burma would temporarily be administered by a United States-led civil authority, much like what happened in post-war Japan and Germany. The goals of the protectorate would be clear and quite limited in scope: to eradicate human trafficking networks, dismantle the fraud factories, disarm unlawful militias, and build indigenous capacities for security and governance. Crucially, this includes hunting down and prosecuting the crime syndicate leaders who have, up to now, found sanctuary. Just as the United States Drug Enforcement Administration brought Noriega to justice in an American court, so too would the kingpins of Yatai New City and similar hellholes face extradition and trial for their crimes, both financial and human. The message to every scammer and trafficker in Burma would be unambiguous: you can no longer hide behind a rogue state. On the governance side, the United States administration, in partnership with international organizations and Myanmar's pro-democracy leaders in exile, would lay the foundation for a new Burmese government. This involves humanitarian relief, rebuilding institutions, and guiding the writing of a new constitution that guarantees rights and the rule of law. During the interim, as American officials act as custodians of Burmese sovereignty, we would ensure that basic services and security are provided to the population. Our forces, together with peacekeeping contributions from allies, would protect vulnerable groups, such as ethnic minorities long persecuted by the junta, and create an environment where refugees can return home safely. Economic reconstruction would focus on legitimate livelihoods, for instance, converting the infrastructure of scam parks into technology hubs or education campuses that actually benefit the locals, rather than exploit them. By the end of the protectorate period, whose exact length would depend on on-the-ground progress, but is not meant to be indefinite, Burma would emerge as a nation free from both dictatorship and organized crime, with a democratically elected government aligned with the international community. Instead of being a pariah state that exports fraud and misery, it could become a responsible member of the family of nations, a transformation only possible because the United States and its allies chose to act with resolve. In closing the affirmed case, we must stress the reality that Burma's crisis directly affects American lives and United States national security. The linkage from a coerced scam worker in a compound along the Moai River to a retiree in Illinois losing her pension is not just theoretical. It's happening now, every single day. The American people deserve a government that will defend them from such predation. By authorizing the use of military force to put an end to the Burmese junta's criminal sanctuary, Congress will be taking necessary action to protect United States citizens from financial fraud and identity theft on a massive scale. Equally, we'll be answering the call of our values, striking down a regime that thrives on slavery and theft, and freeing a long-suffering population from tyranny. We must surely be mindful of the costs and risks inherent in any military operation, but those costs must be weighed against the cost of inaction. If we do nothing, the scams will continue to metastasize, likely expanding their focus to even more Western targets. More Americans will fall victim, and a brutal junta will further entrench a criminal state amid a worsening civil war. America has always strived to be a force for good and a shield for the innocent. In this case, being true to that legacy means not only employing our diplomatic and economic tools, but also, when all else fails, our military power to uphold justice and security. The proposal to establish a protectorate in Burma is a bold one, yet it is rooted in the very precedents that have defined American leadership in the past. From the Barbary Wars to the liberation of Europe and the Pacific, we have acted so that freedom and safety could prevail over oppression and lawlessness. Today, we face a new breed of oppressors, tech-savvy traffickers, and a complicit, tyrannical regime. And we must show them the resolve of a great nation unwilling to let its people be victimized. We ask for clarity of vision and unity of purpose in this endeavor. The government should send a message to every American citizen that it will go to the ends of the earth to protect them, and to every enslaved person in a scam compound that their freedom is not forgotten. Let us move forward with confidence that this action, though challenging, is just and necessary for the security of Americans and the liberation of Burma. With the Burma case now fully articulated, from the direct harms inflicted on Americans to the structure of state complicity, the exhaustion of peaceful remedies, the clarity of military objectives, and the commitment to post-conflict responsibility, it becomes useful to examine how this framework aligns with other intervention scenarios currently moving through the policy process. One such case is Venezuela, where calls for US military action have already entered the operational domain, and where language of justification is beginning to crystallize. If the administration's emerging Venezuela model is to serve not only as a rationale for action, but as a precedent-setting template, it must be held to the same evidentiary and strategic standards demonstrated in the Burma proposal. We turn now not to a hypothetical comparison, but a necessary calibration. A direct application of that standard to a parallel case already in progress within the national security establishment. The contrast is clarifying. It shows not only what a coherent intervention argument includes, but how easily the threshold for war can erode when that structure is absent. The core of any legitimate military intervention must begin with a clearly defined injury. In the case of Burma, the argument lays out unmistakable harm to US citizens. Scam compounds operating with junta support in eastern Myanmar directly target Americans with cyber fraud, identity theft, and financial deception. Losses that the US Treasury and FBI quantify in the tens of billions. These are not abstract geopolitical injuries. They are direct, personal, and measurable, affecting retirees, working families, and individuals across the country. The perpetrators are not only criminals, but function within fixed territories under the protection of military-aligned militias. The harm is sustained, systemic, and rising. By contrast, the Venezuela case, as articulated by the Trump administration and its media surrogates, centers on assertions of narco-trafficking and organized crime, particularly involving the Maduro regime. The US has accused Venezuela of functioning as a narco-state, and indictments have been filed against Maduro himself. However, the claim that Americans are suffering direct, quantifiable harm as a result of Venezuelan government-backed activity remains vague. Drug flows from South America to the United States are real, but they are diffuse, multilateral, and not unique to Venezuela. Unlike Burma, there is no clear documentation showing how Venezuelan-linked activities are directly responsible for a particular share of the drug epidemic or fatalities. Thus, the personal dimension of harm, which in the Myanmar case is vivid and emotionally resonant, remains abstract in the Venezuelan one. A central feature of the Burma argument is that the state itself, or at least its armed elements, is not simply failing to prevent harm, but actively complicit in it. Burmese military-linked militias provide electricity, security, and territorial access to scam complexes where victims are trafficked and forced to carry out fraud. This is not a matter of weak governance, it is a criminal partnership. US intelligence and human rights monitors have documented this alliance in detail. In essence, the state has outsourced sovereignty to organized crime in return for revenue. In Venezuela, by contrast, the accusation of state complicity is far more generalized. The US claims Maduro is part of a criminal conspiracy, but this claim rests on legal indictments rather than concrete, widely publicized operations. There are no public reports of Venezuelan state forces providing logistical support to criminal operations with the same specificity as the Shui Koko or Yatai New City scam compounds in Burma. It's entirely possible, even likely, that corrupt networks operate within Venezuela's military or political elite. But the claim that the Venezuelan state systematically enables harm to Americans through discrete criminal enterprises has not yet been substantiated in the public domain with the same granularity. The moral and legal legitimacy of using force also depends on a demonstration that other measures have failed. In the Myanmar argument, this is made explicit. Sanctions have been imposed, diplomatic overtures attempted, regional cooperation sought, all to little effect. The junta has either ignored or directly defied these measures precisely because it profits from the disorder. The case makes clear that law enforcement tools cannot reach inside Myanmar due to sovereignty barriers and militia protection. The Burmese state is portrayed as immune to every instrument of peaceful pressure. In Venezuela, however, the claim that lesser measures have failed has not been similarly developed. Sanctions exist, and the US has publicly opposed the Maduro regime for years, but the current push for kinetic action, especially naval interdictions or strikes, lacks a clear narrative arc. What specific non-military efforts have been exhausted in stopping alleged drug shipments? Has there been a good faith attempt to coordinate extradition, intelligence sharing, or regional interdiction via multilateral channels like the Organization of American States? If so, it has not been publicly framed as a case of last resort. The case appears to skip ahead to punishment before persuasion has been shown to fail. A compelling use of force argument must also explain what military action will achieve, and how. In Burma, this is laid out with precision. Scam compounds have physical addresses. The military controls territory. There are identifiable militias, buildings, and infrastructures that serve as the physical nodes of the threat. The objective is to liberate enslaved workers, destroy the scam industry, dismantle militias, and remove the junta. There is a theory of what must be done, by whom, and where. In contrast, the Venezuela case offers no such clarity. Talk of striking drug boats or targeting cartel-linked assets suggests a tactic, not a strategy. There is no explanation of how such strikes would meaningfully reduce narcotics flows, nor how military action would degrade the regime's capacity to support them. There is no identification of infrastructure, no plan for operations in territory, no special forces concept, and no discussion of how to prevent blowback. If the purpose is to pressure or remove Maduro, then there must be a military theory of regime change, which is not articulated. If the purpose is just to signal resolve or punish wrongdoing, it is unclear how such limited strikes meet the threshold for lawful and effective force. Perhaps the greatest difference between the two arguments lies in what follows military action. In the Burma case, we outline a US-administered protectorate, modeled on post-war Germany or Japan. The logic is sequential. First, destroy the criminal regime. Second, protect the population. Third, rebuild governance and security institutions. Finally, return the country to its people under democratic norms. There is recognition of the complexity, but also a seriousness in proposing a long-term solution. No such plan is offered for Venezuela. If Maduro were deposed or killed, then what? There is no identified interim government, no proposed model for law enforcement or governance, no outline for economic reconstruction, no discussion of refugee repatriation or civil-military stabilization. The Venezuela argument begins and ends with punishment, an indictment without a sentence. The lack of a post-conflict model raises the suspicion that the motivation is political or theatrical, not restorative. Legally, the Burma case presents multiple avenues for justification. It invokes the right of self-defense, both against financial predation and trafficking. It proposes congressional authorization through an AUMF. It situates the action within the framework of prior interventions, supported by the US and its allies, and gestures toward the possibility of a UN mandate. It is not perfect, but it anticipates the legitimacy question and offers answers. The Venezuela case, by contrast, is already faltering under legal scrutiny. Courts have challenged the use of emergency powers to deport Venezuelans under the Alien Enemies Act, explicitly rejecting the idea that the Maduro government represents an invading power. There is no discussion of an AUMF, no clear self-defense claim grounded in active hostilities, and no pathway to a multilateral legal mandate. The legal argument feels reverse-engineered, reactive rather than principled. Finally, a serious case for intervention must consider how others will react. The Burma argument attempts this. It acknowledges China's role and even proposes a framework for limiting escalation. It recognizes regional actors and suggests a cooperative model that could include ASEAN states, international peacekeepers, and multilateral funding. It even turns the logic of China and Russia's own interventionist justifications against them, forcing a rhetorical consistency. The Venezuela case shows no such awareness. Latin America has a long and bitter memory of US interventions. Any kinetic action against Caracas would ripple through the hemisphere. Russia and Iran have strategic ties with the Maduro regime. Escalation would likely follow. Without a robust coalition or a compelling moral and legal framing, any US action would risk looking imperial and self-serving, precisely the critique that the Burma case attempts to preempt through detail and proportionality. In sum, the Burma argument could potentially succeed because it meets the standard any military intervention should be required to meet. A direct harm to US citizens, clear state complicity, exhausted alternatives, achievable military objectives, a principled legal foundation, and a humane plan for what comes next. It is complete. The Venezuela argument, as it currently stands, fails on nearly all of those counts. It is not necessarily wrong, but it is incomplete, shallow, and reactive. If the United States is to be a principled actor in the world, it must hold every proposed intervention to the highest standard, especially when the alternatives to war have not yet been seriously pursued. Before we conclude, it is necessary to confront the inverse of the argument we have constructed. Our main case demonstrated how, when viewed through a narrow lens of direct harms and legal formality, an intervention in Burma could appear justifiable, even urgent. But that exercise was meant to expose the power of selective reasoning, not to endorse its conclusions. Once we step back and consider the totality of consequences, the case for invading Burma collapses. First, the operational reality would be catastrophic. Myanmar is not a compact dictatorship like Panama in 1989. It is a country the size of Texas with rugged terrain, a dozen active insurgencies, and a battle-hardened military supported by powerful neighbors. Any US invasion would face a prolonged insurgency, enormous civilian displacement, and regional escalation. What looks like a discrete operation on paper would in practice become a multi-year counter-insurgency and nation-building project, one with no clear exit and immense human cost. Second, the geopolitical repercussions would be immediate and severe. China and Russia both maintain significant interests in Burma, from border security to natural resource access. A US protectorate on China's southern frontier would be perceived not as humanitarian liberation, but as encirclement. The resulting confrontation could destabilize the entire Indo-Pacific and jeopardize cooperation on global issues ranging from trade to non-proliferation. Third, even if military success were possible, political legitimacy would be absent. Few allies would join such an operation. ASEAN and the United Nations would almost certainly oppose it. The image of the United States occupying yet another Asian nation, this time under the banner of fighting cybercrime, would reignite memories from Iraq to Vietnam, undermining the very moral authority the intervention claims to restore. Fourth, there are viable alternatives far short of war. The same intelligence, financial and cyber capabilities invoked in the military plan could instead be deployed to strangle the scam networks at their source. Coordinated sanctions enforcement, targeted cyber operations, cross-border law enforcement task forces, and humanitarian extraction of trafficking victims. Each of these paths carries risk, but none require bombing a sovereign state. Finally, there is the moral paradox. To rescue victims of coercion and fraud through large-scale warfare would almost certainly kill civilians, displace families, and destroy the fragile social fabric we claim to defend. The idea that freedom can be imposed by force has failed too many times to be repeated under a new rationale. The true test of American leadership is not our ability to project power, but our discipline in restraining it. Thus, even in a case that meets every formal criterion for a just war, prudence, legitimacy, and morality still counsel against it. The Burma argument was an exercise in completeness, not a call to arms. Its very strength, when followed to its logical end, reveals the deeper wisdom of restraint. What the Burma analysis ultimately demonstrates is not the desirability of intervention, but the danger of selective reasoning in arguments for war. By isolating one category of harm, in this case targeted financial predation against Americans, it is always possible to construct a case that appears urgent, morally compelling, and logically airtight. Indeed, the Burma scenario shows how quickly a narrative of defending Americans can expand into a blueprint for regime change, occupation, and quasi-colonial administration, all while retaining a veneer of legality and moral responsibility. But that is precisely why the Burma example matters. Because even after stacking the deck in favor of intervention, even after identifying direct harms, clear state complicity, failed sanctions, identifiable targets, and a post-conflict plan, the moment we widen the aperture to include real-world constraints, geopolitics, feasibility, public cost, allied support, escalation risk, legitimacy, long-term occupation burdens, the argument no longer holds. The best-case war turns into a catastrophic one the instant we stop treating military force like a clean, isolated policy tool, and instead acknowledge it as a generator of unpredictable second- and third-order consequences. And that is the point. If a case as seemingly strong as Burma collapses under full-spectrum scrutiny, then a weaker case, like the one being advanced for Venezuela, which lacks even half the evidentiary or strategic grounding, does not merely fall short. It is revealed for what it is, a slogan masquerading as strategy, a grievance inflated into a justification, a policy of force proposed without a theory of aftermath. If we would not go to war in the scenario where the justification is strongest, we cannot go to war in the scenario where the justification is weakest. A democracy that is serious about the lives of its citizens, both those sent to fight and those living with the consequences, cannot authorize force on the basis of fragments, fears, or talking points. The burden of proof must be heavy, and it must be met in full, not in part. The Burma model shows what that level of proof looks like, and why, when honestly applied, it almost always leads not to intervention, but to restraint. And lo, we stand where fire meets the throne of dream, two mouths of truth against the serpent's scheme. We trace the path from fraud to throne to fire, each step exact, each motive clean, entire. Yet find no peace behind the broken gate, just mirrored wrath and consequences late. The scroll is sweet, but bitter is the rod, no justice found where man would judge as God. So let the watchers rise with clearer sight, not blinded by the glamour of the fight. Subscribe not to the thunder of the gun, but to the voice that asks, what shall be won?